It is about who gets to eat and who gets eaten. It is about preventing others from being more fully human. Never in history has violence been initiated by the oppressed or the subordinate group. How could they be the initiators if they themselves are the result of violence, if they themselves are the objects of violence? Hey y'all, welcome to my YouTube channel where we learn together, take action together, and reflect together. My name is Tamira and thank you so much for being here. Today we are going to learn about oppression. We are going to learn what oppression is, why oppression happens, and how oppression happens. Our learning today is going to be very conceptual, meaning we are going to deeply explore the core ideas, the main ideas of oppression. So hop in the car and let's ride. We are going to start with a definition. What does oppression mean? I encourage you to pause the video and write down or think about your definition. Here's mine. Oppression is any act or situation in which a person or group prevents another person or group from being more fully human. Let me put that in simpler terms. Oppression is when a person or group makes life unfair for others and stops them from reaching their full potential, treating them differently, or denying them opportunities. Oppression is like putting a wall around someone and blocking their path to do all the things they can do and want to do. It's blocking their path to be the best that they can be. Oppression is when a person or group prevents another person from being their true self or from living their lives freely because of who they are or where they come from. Oppression is when someone with more power uses it to control others, taking away their rights and choices. Oppression can be divided into 5 categories: exploitation, marginalization, cultural imperialism, powerlessness, and violence. I am going to explain each of these categories, starting with exploitation. Exploitation is using a person or group's labor to make a profit and not compensate them fairly. So if you are using someone's labor, their work, whether physical, intellectual, emotional, or sexual, for your own benefit to make money without paying them what they are worth, without compensating them fairly, then you are exploiting them, and that is oppression. Exploitation can take many forms, such as low or no wages, long work hours, and dangerous working conditions. Exploitation causes and reproduces inequality. It causes significant economic disadvantages. It creates and maintains divisions by keeping one group poor and powerless. Marginalization is the exclusion of a person or group from full participation in life. Marginalized groups are ostracized, segregated, discriminated against, disregarded, deprived, and are often targets of violence. Marginalized groups are positioned by the dominant culture to be dependent. They are denied equal citizenship rights and access to resources and opportunities. Cultural imperialism is when a dominant group decides that their way of doing things, their traditions, stories, beliefs, and values are the only ones that matter. The dominant group takes their experiences and culture and makes them the norm. They exercise their power by controlling the weaker group. They decide what makes the weaker group different. Those differences can be based on race, gender, class, or religion. The dominant group sees these differences as lacking, as negative, as opposition in comparison to their norms and what they think is the right way. Cultural imperialism can happen through force or through the dominant culture's influence. It can lead to the loss of native or traditional cultures, and it can lead to ethnic cleansing. Powerlessness describes people with little or no control over their lives. Powerless people don't get to make choices about what happens to them or around them, and their voices are not heard. They exercise little to no creativity in their work and have no technical expertise or authority. Powerless people don't feel confident expressing their perspectives or ideas. They express themselves awkwardly and don't command respect. Powerlessness is often the result of marginalization or exploitation. Not being able to fully participate in society or not being paid for your work is a recipe for the absence of power. Violence is the intentional use of physical force or power to inflict harm on another person or group of people. There is physical violence, psychological violence, sexual violence, verbal violence, economic violence, and symbolic violence. Violence can be used to control and intimidate people. It can also be used to destroy property and communities. Violence can cause harm through neglect, omission, or structural factors that create unsafe or harmful environments. Violence as it relates to oppression is systemic, legitimized, and directed at marginalized groups who live under threats of random and unprovoked attacks. This violence is a common occurrence and little is done to its offenders. All 5 faces of oppression are interconnected and can reinforce each other. For example, exploitation can lead to marginalization. Marginalization can lead to powerlessness. Cultural imperialism can be used to justify violence, and violence can be used to maintain control of the oppressed. These 5 faces are all interrelated and work together to create a system of oppression that keeps certain groups of people at the bottom of society. Why does oppression happen? Why would a group of people want to prevent another group of people from being more fully human? To begin to answer that question, I am going to read a quote from a scholar named Michael Parenti. Throughout history, there has been only one thing that the ruling interests have ever wanted, and that is everything. All the choice lands, all the forest, all the game, all the herds, harvests, mineral deposits, and precious metals of the earth. All the wealth, riches, and profitable returns. All the productive facilities, gainful inventiveness and technologies. All the control positions of the state and other major institutions. All public supports and subsidies, privileges and immunities. All the protections of the law with none of its constraints. All the services, comforts, luxuries, and advantages of civil society with none of the taxes and cost. Every ruling class has wanted only this. All the rewards and none of the burdens. The operational code is we have a lot, we can get more, and we want it all. A group prevents another group from being more fully human because they want more power, more land, more money, more property, more ownership, more possessions, and more control, even at the cost of the other group of people having less or having nothing. Oppression is about greed. It is about currency, which is the measure of all things. The primary goal or motivation for oppressing, exploiting, marginalizing others, and denying them their full humanity is profit or economic gain. A group exploits another group because they want more. And in order to get more, the dominant group, also known as the cultural imperialists, the colonizers, the savages, the settlers, the oppressors, they create social hierarchies and they decide the norms and values that govern how society operates. They do this while the subordinate group, also known as the marginalized, the lower class, the destitute, the pariahs, the derelicts, the downtrodden, the oppressed, they are dismissed or relegated to the bottom, to the lower ranks of the hierarchy, to positions of limited opportunities. The dominant group is driven by a relentless pursuit of wealth, and all they want to do is take from the lower group. The dominant group gets richer and more powerful, while the subordinate group experiences more poverty and more marginalization. It is about who gets to eat and who gets eaten. It is about preventing others from being more fully human. And so how does this happen? How does one group gain total dominance over another group? How does one group exploit another group? How does one group hinder another group's pursuit of self-affirmation as a responsible people? How does one group climb to the higher ranks of society, to the top of the social hierarchy, while the other group stays at the bottom? How does one group prevent another group from being more fully human? This interference, this hindrance, this prevention, this annihilation, this enslavement, this colonization, this dispossession, this establishment of dominance over another group usually begins with a form of violence that is always initiated by the oppressor. Never in history has violence been initiated by the oppressed or the subordinate group. How could they be the initiators if they themselves are the result of violence, if they themselves are the objects of violence? So what happens after the oppressor initiates violence and establishes their position of power? They use their power to maintain control, often through more violence or the threat of violence. The constant threat of violence becomes a way of life for the oppressed, shaping their expectations and their behaviors. It creates fear and intimidation, stopping many attempts to break free. Oppressors use their power to dominate the oppressed without considering their well-being. They view them as property for their own gain, something to be bought, sold, and discarded at will. This positions the oppressed to be economically disadvantaged, to not have enough resources to live full lives, to thrive. Oppressors dehumanize and objectify. They fail to recognize the oppressed as fellow human beings and reduce them to simple objects. The oppressor denies the oppressed full humanity by limiting their potential and growth. They hinder their ability to flourish as individuals by denying them opportunities for self-determination, education, and personal development. Oppressors often fail to recognize the privilege they have due to their position of power and due to the dehumanization of others. They ignore the role they play in perpetuating systemic inequalities that unfairly disadvantage others. The oppressor fails to see how their pursuit of power and control disrupts the peace and well-being of those they oppress. They tend to view their wealth and status as earned and justified because of their own effort and courage. They believe they pulled themselves up by their own bootstraps. The oppressor says that any hardships faced by the oppressed are because of personal failings like laziness or incompetence. The oppressor labels the oppressed as sick, ungrateful, envious, or unproductive. The oppressor views the oppressed as potential threats or enemies. The oppressed often hear that they are good for nothing, know nothing, and are incapable of learning anything. This narrative feeds into the dangerous belief that the oppressed were born disaffected, deficient, lacking, violent, or that they deserve their suffering. This structure of domination causes the oppressed to adapt and to internalize the oppressor's negative beliefs and opinions. The oppressed may doubt their own abilities and worth, perpetuating a cycle of self-doubt and inferiority. They become convinced of their own unfitness. The oppressed may accept their exploitation as a given, unaware of the root causes of their condition. The oppressed feel inferior to the oppressor because the oppressor seems to be the only one who knows things and is able to run things. In some cases, the oppressed may develop an emotional dependence on the oppressor, believing that they need the oppressor's guidance or approval to survive and to thrive. The oppressed naturally distrust themselves and overlook the knowledge they have gained through their experiences and their interactions with the world. This lack of awareness, this dependence, this dismissal of their knowledge and power can stop them from challenging and breaking free from the oppressive system. It can stop them from seeking liberation. Oppressors do not care about the humanity, rights, and well-being of others. They prioritize power, control, and personal gain at the expense of other people's dignity and potential. The oppressors deny the oppressed the fundamental right to be fully human. They transform them into mere objects to be manipulated and controlled. There would be no oppressed had there been no prior situation of violence used to dominate them. This cycle of violence and injustice is passed down, taught, and perpetuated from generation to generation. Oppressors teach their kids to use violence to dominate, and their kids teach their kids. The oppressor's children inherit the legacy of violence and control. They become its heirs. The children of the oppressors become shaped by the culture and climate of violence, while the children of the oppressed inherit the trauma and limitations imposed upon their parents and ancestors by the oppressive system. I want to end with this. The oppressor cannot free the oppressed. The oppressed must free themselves. And as the oppressed fight to be more fully human, they take away the oppressor's power to dominate. When the oppressed respond to the violence of the oppressor, it is grounded in the desire to pursue the right to be more fully human. And that's all I got for now, y'all. Thank y'all so much for riding with me. I know that was a lot. I know it was heavy and complex, and you might have to watch this video a few times for the ideas to settle and marinate. But I am wondering, as you were listening, processing, and taking this all in, did you think of any specific examples of acts or situations of oppression in our world, historically or present day? What groups are preventing other groups from being fully human? What groups are being prevented from being fully human? What does it mean to be fully human? I'm eager to know your thoughts and reflections, so please share them in the comments. And please don't forget to like, subscribe, or share my video. It really helps build the community so that we can all continue to learn together, take action together, and reflect together. Again, thank y'all for being here. I love y'all. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you next time. Bye.